Could this king be David, king of the Israelites? And this one, Caesar Augustus? That's why you're here, right? Today we're going to unmask the true identities behind these famous kings, queens, and jacks. Face cards revealed. And I'm sure you've thought of this one. Why is he putting a sword in his head? What's that? Why? Here's a standard 52 card poker deck. It looks completely familiar, doesn't it? There was a time when almost every brand of deck would look unique, but the quirkiness of those cards were sacrificed to allow for clarity and consistency to all players. Was it worth the sacrifice? That's your call. And yet, there is something about this vanilla deck that still holds style and mystery. Most card decks you're familiar with have numbered cards, you know, ace through 10. These are known as pip cards. The others are face cards, the king, the queen, the jack. Those are also known as court cards, for obvious reasons. In modern decks, the pip cards aren't usually very elaborate, not as much as they are functional. So why are the face cards so much more elaborate? And who, if anyone, are the kings and queens based on? The answer may surprise you. Or not. It's believed that China is the birthplace of playing cards, and their cards art was quite striking. But court cards are not thought to be a Chinese invention. Sources point to the Persian state of Iran as having the first deck of cards containing court cards. They were a bit different than the king, queen, and jack we use today. And yet what they exported through the Arab world caught on and eventually evolved into the court cards we know. But why have face cards at all? Well, let's take the journey. Playing cards were first recorded in Italy around the year 1370. And they were most certainly brought in by Islamic Egyptian merchants. This literal handoff from the Arab world to the Christian world is an important factor in the history of cards. Here we have one of the oldest known decks of cards. It's a 15th century Mamluk deck from Egypt. They really are beautiful, and if you happen to have a 500-year-old deck, drop your contact info and I'll take it off your hands. Did you notice that there are no pictures of kings, queens, or jacks? Of course. According to Islamic law, iconography is a no-no, anaconism. It was up to God alone to bring life, and pictures of people were considered doing just that. So here you have this amazing Islamic invention, suited playing cards, but your face cards were, well, faceless. Sure, there was some writing on the court cards letting you know there was a king, a first lieutenant, a second lieutenant. Even though there were no pictures of kings, it was very important to have a king be the top of the suit. You see, back in this time, the ruling class was very important, and thus you would be familiar with kings and their soldiers ruling just about everything. The Europeans used the feudal system, which made their farmers work like slaves, and many Arab states had the Mamluk system, which had a military made up of slaves. Either way, people in these regions would fall into place whenever their king spoke. The king was the boss, and it just made sense to have a king at the top of a suit. So were pictures of royalty put on by the Europeans to help them read the cards better? It's possible, but, and this is a bit of a hot take, it's possible that the pictures were added to snub the Arab merchants. While there's no direct evidence of this theory, let me tell you what we do know. In 1379, the Chronicles of Viterbo recorded that a new game called Nabe was introduced by a sacristan. The game became very popular, and shortly after it was banned by the Catholic Church. So why would the Catholic Church ban a game? Well, the Catholic Church did ban a lot of stuff. Dice, gambling, meat. The church had been at war with Islamic states for many years, and around this time, Christian-held parts of North Africa, Sicily, and Spain were falling into the hands of Islamic leaders. While this offered exchanges in culture, education, games, it was also a time full of bloodshed and displacement. It would have seemed outrageous that your enemy was warring your lands and getting you to play their cool new game. So the church banned the cards, but not for long. Shortly after, a new deck of cards emerges, one with 4 suits, just like the Egyptian deck, except now there are pictures on the court cards. The people rejoice and start playing. Well, not all the people. Face cards would have been off limits to the Islamic merchants with anaconism and all, meaning it would limit the interactions of Christians and Islamic merchants. In short, Mario and Mohammed wouldn't be able to play the same game. This might have felt like a victory for the Italian church. They could have their cannoli and eat it. The exchange of ideas should always win over division, and getting 2 worlds to play cards together is a gain, not a loss. In Italy, we began to see face cards including the king, a horse-riding knight, and a Jack or Jane. Less than 100 years later, France dropped the horse-riding knight, and we began to see the more familiar king, queen, and jack court cards. The French made their design standard and kept the colors to just black and red, and they could produce the cards much cheaper. And if history tells us anything, the cheaper something is, the quicker it will spread. The British accepted these, and they soon spread to the Americas. Side note, the Italians must have been a little put off that the French outdid them by adding the queen card. In fact, shortly after, The Italians added a queen to a new deck, giving that deck a 4th court card. That deck style still exists. It's called the tarot deck. Lots of different royals appeared on the non-standard decks over the years. But once the French standardized the deck, who were the royals that stayed on that deck? Surprisingly, they weren't French nobles. Instead, they went with historic or mythological royals from Greek, Roman, Christian, and Jewish traditions. Did they omit Arab royals out of respect for anachronism, or the opposite? You can insert your own hot take if you like. Although there is no official declaration on which royal is on which card, some of the oldest publications listed it in this way. For kings, they went for some pretty good choices. The kings are Charlemagne for the hearts, the Old Testament King David for spades, Julius Caesar for the diamonds, and Alexander the Great for clubs. The French did a great job selecting some really important kings over time. You have Charlemagne, you also have Julius Caesar. Some people say it was Augustus Caesar, the start of the Roman Empire. That's a pretty big deal. The start of the Caesar system, the king system. You have King David, we know him from the Old Testament, the Torah, killed Goliath with a slingshot. And then you had Alexander the Great, obviously, doesn't need a lot of introduction there. He's got the Great in his title, good choices there. Now the queens, they didn't really do their homework, I think. There are a lot of historical queens they could have picked. They could have picked Queen Sheba, maybe Cleopatra, Joan of Arc, perhaps. Lots of great queens. They just kind of phoned in the queens, I think. One of the choices is good, Athena, but the others are kind of lacking, and one of them is just pathetic. So the queens were Judith and Rachel, both from the Bible. That's diamonds and hearts, respectively. The Greek goddess Athena for the Queen of Spades. And then you have the Queen of Clubs. Now this is kind of a missed opportunity, I'd say. Argine, or Argine. And that's not a real or mythological queen of any sort. That was just a Latin anagram for the word queen. Not very creative.
And who is Judith? The book of Judith is considered a fictional tale from the Old Testament, and the story tells of Judith, an Israelite who was upset that her lands had been seized by the Assyrians. Judith gained the trust of her enemy's general, and after getting him drunk, she beheaded him. A truly badass woman. Because of her knowledge of cutlery, spades would have been a better suit for her. Rachel's story isn't nearly as exciting. She was one of Jacob's many wives, and though she was said to be his favorite, he had no qualms with marrying her sister first. By no account did she wield much queenly power either. The Bible recorded little else of note for her, although she did lie and steal for her husband. To aid her husband and her sister wives, she stole the deed to her father's flock, ergo his wealth. Her father asked if he could look for it, and she said no, because she was currently menstruating on it. It is odd when there are so many other women of higher accomplishments that she got this position of importance in the deck of cards.
They picked up the pace for the jacks, though. These were named for the bloodthirsty warriors of fame. You have a legendary warrior, Ogier the Dane. He was the Jack of Spades. He's sort of a companion to Charlemagne, so you can see how he made this. Hearts had the French Etienne de Vignoles, doubt I got that right, aka La Hire, the Wrath of God. La Hire was a French commander and a friend of Joan of Arc, slayed many Englishmen, so he of course stood in for the French spirit there. Then we go back to Greek mythology for diamonds. Hector is the Jack here. Hector was the greatest warrior for Troy during the Trojan War. It should be noted that he was a prince, so if he was real, he might have been insulted that he was given the rank of Jack. Lastly is the mythological English knight of the Round Table, Lancelot. He's representing the clubs, although Guinevere would have given him a heart on his card. The suit, the hearts, she would have, they were in love. These designations may have come from one of the oldest French sources. However, that's only one source, and others make claims for different royals and religious and other mythological figures. Not everyone agreed with who should be on which face card, so face cards without names sold better and were printed more often. Slowly, the namesakes fell into obscurity and we're left with nameless court cards. But now you have the names to go with them. And you can impress people with this, or you can annoy them. Know your audience. And what about this guy? King Charlemagne, right? Now, some people know this card as the Suicide King, but why is he sticking a sword into his head? Well, the heart suit was originally the cup suit in the Italian and Egyptian decks. When he switched to hearts, it didn't make sense for him to hold a cup anymore, so they gave him an axe. As you can see in this older card, he's holding it over his shoulder in a sort of chopping pose. Now, axes aren't very dignified for kings, especially King Charlemagne, and later he was given a sword. But the card kept that chopping pose. The card space is so tight that he had to hold the sword horizontally behind his head. The unintended visual was that it looked like he was sticking the sword into his own head. Or so this story goes. Playing cards extend well beyond the arena of entertainment. In many ways, the story of playing cards followed or even changed human history. Next time you play a card game, you might realize that you're holding not only a game in your hand, but a document of our past. Did you like this video? Let me know if I got something wrong or if you heard it differently, or just want to say hi. Please comment, like, and subscribe to help keep this alive. See you next time on Playing Games. Speaking of face cards, don't forget the Queen of Likes card. That card needs no explanation. Just do what it says.